Hey guys, good morning and happy Tuesday. Um, Hope you all had a great weekend. Today we are going to be looking at something that we are all hopefully pretty familiar with, but we're just going to be reviewing this. A very sobering topic. We're going to be looking at the Holocaust during World War II. Okay, so if you review with me real quick, if you review with me real quick and kind of track with me where we've been so far. Okay, we saw how the bitterness of Germany, Italy, and Japan were all very frustrated from the end of World War One. Right, they were mad because they felt disrespected. They felt like justice has not been done as a result of World War One. They felt like they were treated unfairly, and so you see these dictators and these military powers rise in these three countries, which we would call the Axis powers, right? In these three countries, Germany, Italy, and Japan, we see these powers rise to, in their points of view, set the balance in the world again, right? To rectify serious wrongs against their country. At least that's their point of view. And so we saw Mussolini lead Italy and start to take parts of Africa. We saw Japan do the same in the Pacific. And then we saw Hitler and his rise of power start to move throughout Europe and take small countries at first to see what the rest of Europe would do. When Hitler found out that they were so against going back to war that they would just let him kind of do what he wanted to do, he built his forces up really strong and he invaded Poland and the rest of Europe and took pretty much mainland continent of Europe in less than a year. And so that's where we left off with Europe. In the Pacific, we saw that Japan realized that if they were going to become the dominant force in the Pacific, the only country in the world that could possibly challenge their dominance of Pacific control would be the United States. And while they had no beef at the time with the United States, they wanted to make sure that the United States, if they changed their mind, would never, ever, ever try to oppose Japan, that they couldn't oppose Japan. And so their answer to making sure the United States couldn't oppose Japan was to launch a massive surprise attack at Pearl Harbor and decimate the United States Navy in the Pacific. Now, what Japan didn't realize was that when we, from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific, our massive area of land, when we as a country, as a United States, rally together to fight something, which is the point I was making, I believe, Friday or Thursday, when we rally together to fight something, it makes us the greatest power on the planet, quite frankly. Our ability to churn out natural resources, our ability to dominate and trade, our ability to mass produce things is second to none in the rest of the world. We see it kind of happen in China now, but usually their quality of products is not as good as American quality of products, right? And so when the United States needs to defend itself from something, it's really is kind of I don't think anybody truly understands the ability of our country when we unite fully against one enemy. It's pretty amazing. And Japan didn't realize, and I don't think even the United States, the Americans realized how quickly we as a country could rebuild our Navy, could crank out more ships, and build a massive war machine to fight two fronts against Japan and Germany. And so that's where we left off. We saw where we, the United States, had rebuilt our Navy, and we were moving back, taking ground in the Pacific, specifically at the Battle of Midway, where we kind of turn the tides in the Pacific and start to take islands back in the Pacific. And we were making progress toward Tokyo, and that's where we end. Where we ended with Europe was Hitler had taken all of continental Europe, and the only two really major countries left were Britain, which is across, you have to cross the ocean to get to, and the Soviet Union. we'll get to that tomorrow, how militarily everything wraps up. That's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Today, we're looking at something even more sobering, which is the Holocaust. Okay. And so again, I want you to take notes through these slides. I hope you enjoyed looking yesterday at how American women really stepped up in the United States, and how, as the men were drafted, women really start to take these male-dominated jobs. And what the result of that is that women after the war are like, we can do it just as good as you all, right? Why can't we go to work? And so you see a big push, a big ground game for women's equality as a result of World War II, right? That's Rosie the River, to where she's sitting there with her headband on and she's going to work, right? That is iconic for women stepping up in World War II. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what's happening in Europe during World War II, after Hitler has taken all of this, right? And again, this should be a review for most of us, okay? But part of Hitler's whole shtick, okay, so now we're getting into it, part of his whole philosophy was he believed, in part of his thinking, that Germany was the best country that needed to be put back on top, and also that there was the best race, the Aryan race, right? That true German, Aryan Germans, pure-blooded, racially pure, ethnically clean Germans should be put back on top as well. That they were the best race, that they were the most gifted race, that he truly believed that athletically, intellectually, across the board, they were the superior race, just as it was. He believed they were far superior, and that in a good world balance, they would be on top. And so he begins to purify Germany in his mind. Hitler believed that the German people, which he called Aryans, were the master race. He believed that non-Aryans were destined to serve the Aryan. He specifically hated Jews and believed that they should not even serve the Germans, but should be eliminated. At the left is a depiction of a pure Aryan family on the cover of the 1938 calendar published by the Nazi Party. Okay. I often have gotten the question when I've taught this, when I teach the Holocaust. Okay, why did he hate Jews specifically so much, right? I mean, like, Jews are white. They're, European. They're, what's his issue with Jews? Are they that much different than Aryan? Okay. Historically, okay, the Jewish people, as you might or may not know, they started out of the Middle East, right? The Jewish people come from, their origins are in the Bible. They are God's chosen people, right? As the Bible tells us. And what you see is, as different groups have conquered the Middle East over time, they have exiled the Jewish people and moved them out of the Middle East. Okay? So, like, you've seen this with the ancient Babylonians, you've seen this with the Romans, that just throughout centuries of time, the Jews have kind of been forced out of their home in Israel, modern-day Israel, forced out of their home through a variety of means, variety of reasons and ways throughout the years, and they have settled throughout the world. Okay? Now, because of what the Bible teaches the Jews, okay, because they typically follow a lot of the Old Testament law, they have inherently become, typically, this is stereotypical, Jewish people stereotypically are more disciplined and better with money. Okay? And so that's why you see the stereotype of a Jewish person being an accountant or a banker, someone who's really good with money, someone who is very disciplined in their livelihood, right? If you look at Old Testament scripture, Jewish people have a huge set of laws and find their identity in adhering to those laws. And so they're very rigorous, very strict, very disciplined, and they draw a lot of their philosophies from the Bible. And so what you've seen is it has made them over time. They've been very successful stereotypically as a people. Even anywhere they go, if they follow those teachings and they stay that disciplined, they've been usually very successful in the world. Okay. And so what happened is as these pockets of Jewish people spread throughout Europe over time, a stereotype came along with them. Okay, if I'm in Italy, okay, we're going to Italy. Say we're in Italy. If we're all Italians and there's this one pocket of Jewish people and they're all wealthy and all successful, and yet we have Italians over here from our country who've been here for a while who are maybe not as successful, who are struggling a little bit. Why? Why is that happening? Okay, excuse that. It's Roomba's running, so hopefully that doesn't distract you all. Okay, but if I'm an Italian and I see the small pocket of Jews that are successful and I'm not, well, why in the world are they successful continuously? Why are all the Jews in Italy, the small pocket, successful, and we have all these Italians who are not? And the rumors and the stigma that started to be associated with Jewish people was that they were some way ripping you off. That these pockets of Jewish people throughout Europe would settle into your community and they would find ways to take your money. Right? And again, I'm not being ugly or anything right now. I'm just saying this is the mindset. This was the belief. Okay? And so that's where the term this is very derogatory. Okay, so excuse me, I don't mean it anyway, but if you were to say or ask, are you Jewing me? Or don't Jew me. Don't rip me off is what that means. And so that very much became the stigma. And so think about that, okay? Think about that. It's Germany. They've been ripped off by the rest of European countries. And then the Great Depression happened, which sunk the economies of the world even further. Hitler had a very easy scapegoat. He had a very easy target. A stigma that was already rooted into the culture about Jewish people, that they were economically drains on your society, that they were going to come in, and he would compare them to like parasites, where they would come into your culture and take away from your economy and your money and your business. And he wasn't creating this culture. Like, it had already been established. A lot of people believe this. And so that's kind of where the historical hate of Jewish people has come from, is a misguided ideology that Jewish people are somehow cheating you out of your money. And so in a really bad economic time, like after the Great Depression, Hitler could say, see, the Jews are at it. The Jews are the fault. It is the Jewish people to blame for a lot of our country's hardships. And people bought into it to a very drastic degree, as we're going to see. And it's one of the most sobering, awful, horrible things to imagine, that we as a species have the capability to do to another group of people. And again, the reality is Jewish people aren't cheating you out of your money. Stereotypically, they've just been much smarter with their money across the board, statistically, and more disciplined than their next door neighbors. And yet everybody else wants to blame them for doing something wrong. And so that's where this comes from. Okay, I know that was a very long-winded explanation, but it's a question I've gotten every year while I'm teaching this. Why did Hitler and the Germans pick the Jews of all people? Well, that's why. They were an easy scapegoat with traditional, systemic, anti-Jewish sentiments built into the culture. Okay, so here's the Aryan race. Every other race should serve the Aryan race, and the Jews are to blame for Germany's problems. That's what we've set up here. And so here's some pictures of propaganda. The perfect, right? Like Aryan family, the blonde head, blue eyes. Same thing over here, right? The smiling girl. So this sets up the stage for the Holocaust. Okay. The Holocaust began with the Nazis passing laws that took away the rights of German Jews. The most famous were the Nuremberg laws, right? So this didn't start out with, hey, let's all go kill all the Jews, right? It didn't start out that way. It slowly happened. Initially, okay, the Jews are to blame. Let's take their stuff. Let's take away their ability to hurt the rest of us. In 1938, Nazi mobs attacked and destroyed Jewish property throughout Germany. This was known as Kristallnacht, or Night of the Broken Glass. As you can see in the picture, it comes from the name of breaking glass windows of stores. This was the beginning of open violence against the Jewish people. These people had nothing to do with anything that was happening in the world. These people did nothing when it comes to hurting Germany or making France and Britain from World War I lay the law down on Germany. They had nothing to do with this. So if you can imagine, if you ever think about this, have you, as a person, have you ever been blamed and punished for something you didn't do? Do you remember how mad that made you feel, how upset, how frustrated that whoever was in charge blamed you and punished you for that thing that you did not do? Okay, imagine an entire race of people who get blamed for something they're not doing. And what ends up happening is, you can imagine being one of those people when you see the news, and you see the propaganda, and you hear the radio, and all this stuff is telling everybody around you that you're to blame. And what you slowly start to see is your best friends, your neighbors, all of society all around you start to turn against you and think you are worse than dirt. Think you have been cheating them their whole lives. Think you have been doing something wrong, that you are the worst people imaginable. Can you imagine what that would feel like? And then they start taking your stuff away because they hate you, and they're being brainwashed to hate you. They're being convinced that you've done something wrong, and you've done nothing. It's an awful, 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 awful thing that was done to these people. And it's really, it takes a lot of effort, mental effort, to really try to put yourself in their shoes. And even when we can really, really empathize with those people, it's not even close to imaginable of what they were actually going through. Psychologically, as we'll see, physically, it's awful. Okay. So then the next step, what you start to see is, after they're properties and their businesses are destroyed and taken away and just given to other Germans, right? So imagine if you've got a family member also who's built their business and maybe their whole life has been poured into their own business, and they get violently kicked out, and that business that they've built gets just handed to somebody else who's close with a government official. Next thing that happens is the creation of the ghettos. Hitler then ordered Jews in Germany and in conquered countries to live in separate neighborhoods called ghettos. These were walled off so that the Jews could not escape. Often the people in the ghettos would starve. Okay, we're going to go pick the worst part of town. So imagine the worst parts of Louisville that are run down, bad infrastructure, bad roads, not good business. Okay, we're going to take that part, pull everybody who is not a Jew out of that part of Louisville, put them into these really nice homes that all these Jews have been building and working for. And we're going to take all those Jews and shove them into that terrible part of Louisville. We're going to wall it off and then let them be. Like, you can't grow food in a city. You can't survive of your own accord by yourself without trade coming in the city. And so the Germans wouldn't even they would give rations into the ghettos, but not enough and not a lot. And so people who are just literally living in a jail cell, I mean, it's obviously a much bigger jail, prison, but they're living in a prison and not being taken care of, and they just die there. And these are the map of the ghettos that you start to see created all throughout Europe. I want to highlight Warsaw right here. If you ever seen the movie, Schindler's List, there's a really tough scene of the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto. And liquidation meaning the purification, going through and taking them off to camps or killing them. And that's what liquidation means. Okay. And so you see the ghettos built. You also start to see Auschwitz, Dachau, and other concentration camps built to where they would literally bring cattle car trains into these ghettos and force the Jews onto the cattle cars. If they didn't comply or resisted in the slightest, they were just shot on spot. And so they get on these cars and they go to concentration camps and they work. And then ultimately, as you all know, are put in gas chambers. Or if they didn't die from malnutrition and starvation at the labor camps. And so as the war progresses and rages on, this gets worse for the Jews. And what you see is Hitler's final solution to the Jew problem, right? The ultimate solution to the Jew problem in his mind. When World War II began, the Nazis would usually murder the Jews in countries that they took over. Soon, they began to realize they could not kill them fast enough. So they came up with the final solution to the Jewish question: mass murder by industrial methods in specially made camps. Camps literally made to kill people. You have to have places to bury people. You have to have ways to figure out what to do with the bodies. These concentration camps were the answer to that. If we can just burn the bodies and kill them in droves, we don't have to waste our time digging graves. We don't have to waste manpower. And while we're at it, while they're waiting, they can do work for us in these camps. I mean, that was the solution. That was the idea. It's mind-blowing that we as a race have the capacity to do this. I mean, can you imagine being this guy in the picture, looking down and seeing your mother or your father or your sister or your brother or your child or your grandparents looking down as they've just been shot, and now you are told to sit on the edge over their grave so you can be shot and fall on top of them? Like, it's unimaginable. If you've never been to Washington D.C., I had the pleasure of going to D.C. My aunt and uncle have a little bit more money than my family did, and as a kind of gift, graduation gift after my senior year of high school, they took me to D.C. with them. And I got to go to D.C. and we got to see a bunch of different things. But one of the days we spent touring the Holocaust Museum. And if you ever have the opportunity to go, I highly recommend it. It is, you just feel it. It is one of the most eye-opening experiences. And if you ever kind of want to go to a museum where they do a really good job of showing you something, that's a really good one. I highly recommend if you ever get to go to DC that you make sure you stop by the Holocaust Museum, because they just it's pretty howling. Okay, um, and so we see these images. I mean, I can imagine what that woman feels with her daughter. Okay, and it's important that we teach about this so that we don't forget. You know, a lot of things with history, and this is kind of a debate. You saw the debate with, I think it was the Confederate flag in South Carolina, or different, Confederate statues. That's kind of where we see it in the United States. But we teach things in history that were atrocious because it's so important that we understand the truths of these things and how they happened, how they got to the point that they got to, so that we can be ever watchful to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Right? That we are checking our government, we are checking our philosophies, our ideologies, the conversations happening on social media. Like, we can always be careful and watchful to make sure the culture isn't built for something like this to ever happen again. That's why we teach about these things. That's why we talk about these things. That's why we get real about these things. That's why, I'm kind of not holding anything back with talking about, using derogatory words that they call Jews, or understanding why they hated Jews, or what the mentality was, or how they got it so wrong, or not hiding these images, or trying to pay. Like, it's important that we understand this. Okay, and so here is now a map of death camps and their routes that were taken to take the Jews there, right? And you can see ghettos. These are all ghettos, and the camps that they were taken to. And there's Auschwitz, the biggest and most notorious one, because look how many areas were bringing Jews into Auschwitz. They made this a very big camp so they can kill a very big number of Jews. Okay. People literally stuffing them, shoving them into the cattle cars to make sure they fit. Here's a picture of the ghettos, right, being labeled with the Star of David is what this is called in their chest, which, if you were walking around town with that on your chest, what this says to the other Germans is that you are the worst of the worst. You're the reason all this is happening. They hate you. People would spit on you. They just pick fights with you for no reason. Like, you're just walking around minding your own business, and people just hate you. So yeah. Here's the lines to get on the trains out of the ghettos. And actually, that's wrong. This is in a camp, because you see the pajamas, right? If y'all ever seen the movie The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, you can imagine that all these people have just gotten off into a camp. There you go. and count the ribs on them. The final solution. The Jews weren't the only ones targeted, although they were the ones that were mainly concentrated on for the reasons I told you, but also other victims of the Nazis, okay, and that list on there, okay, people that the Nazi regime deemed as dangerous, deemed as responsible, deemed as unpure to the Aryan race and could infect the Aryan race if they reproduced. That was their mindset. And so they absolutely took all these people also. The worst camps, right? I mentioned Auschwitz and Dachau. There's some of the others. Okay. And that's where we stopped today. Okay. And just kind of an understanding of what this was. And so make sure you've taken the notes on these. I encourage you to go to the Holocaust Museum website if you ever have free time or you're interested in maybe learning something extra today when you're maybe you're bored or interested. Go look at the Holocaust Memorial website and read up on some of those stuff. You can take virtual tours online. Pretty interesting. But if y'all have any questions, you can email me. Yeah, it's a very sobering topic, and it's tough to talk about, but it's something we need to talk about. So, hope it didn't put you in too damper of a mood, but I appreciate you guys listening. Make sure you took the notes on a Google Doc and you turned that in today. The rest of this week, tomorrow and Thursday and Friday, we are going to be wrapping up World War II. I think, don't quote me on this and don't put this in as doctrine, I think our kind of test for World War II will be in some sort of form of a project that I might give you all a couple of days on. So that'll be kind of how we grade for understanding as far as kind of an assessment goes. So that might be coming down the pipeline either Friday or Monday or Tuesday of next week. Okay. So miss you guys. Hope y'all are all doing well. Thank you for listening. And I will see you. Okay.